It's time for Fully Threaded Radio.
It is Fully Threaded Radio, voice of the FCH Sourcing Network. This is episode 2. We're recording the week of March 29th, 2010, and this episode will be uploaded to the fullythreaded.com website on April 1st. This is Eric Dudas, along with database guru and fashion maven, Mr. Brian Musker. Brian, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, and I'm not sure if I'd really define myself as a fashion maven. Most who know me would know that's completely untrue.
Point taken.
Right.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we received some excellent feedback from episode number 1, and we'll get to that in a second, but let's run down today's show, because I think we have a very good one lined up for you. We'll start off speaking about the economy and the markets with market analyst Holden Lewis of BB&T Capital Markets. He follows the markets and some of the companies that all Fully Threaded listeners know, and I think you'll be somewhat encouraged by what he has to say. In our second segment, we'll talk with attorney Mark Lehnardt. He'll be following up on a recent article that was published in Fastener Technology International magazine and give us some of the latest developments with the anti-dumping and tariff issues that everyone was talking about back in September and October. Our third segment, I think everyone will find interesting. It's a conversation with California-based fastener distributor Joe Truckey, who operates Cal Fasteners out near Anaheim. We had a great conversation with him.
He and his brother operate Cal Fasteners.
That's right. We spoke with Joe, and we'll be playing that in our third segment. So, Brian, I have seen searching kind of spiking again this week and last week, actually for the whole quarter. What's going on here?
Well, I think it's a result of a bit of an uptick in the manufacturing industry. And I think that, a good part of the people who use FCH for searching are manufacturers. Now, we know that we have gazillions of fastener people who regularly use FCH to find the things that they're running out of temporarily, but there's another whole section of the people who use FCH who are the manufacturers who find us by searching in Google, Yahoo or Bing or one of these things. And they just type some fastener into it or some spec and end up with a link to FCH. So the two things. One, the fastener industry replenishing its levels, and two, an increase in manufacturing.
Well, I think we're going to hear something along those lines from analyst Holden Lewis coming up very shortly. And one way or another, the searching on fastenersclearinghouse.com has really been taking quite a leap forward in the month of March.
Yeah, right.
We received interesting feedback, needless to say, from episode 1. Actually, it came in from 3 continents. One of the questions that I thought I'd pass along to you was, Brian, where in Texas is your accent exactly from?
Right. Well, you see, when I first was transferred to the United States, I was transferred to Dallas, and I actually had a number of comments from my friends in Texas who pointed out that I needed to come back to Texas to get a refresher course on how to speak with a Texan accent. Now, I claim that I have a Texan accent, but that is, as everyone knows me, knows, a long-standing joke. And so when people say, where do you come from? I say, Texas. I lived in Texas really for about 9 years. I just didn't quite pick the accent up.
We also heard from a few folks who commented on the show saying that it was a little bit on the long side. What do you have to say to that, Brian?
Well, we also got a number of comments from people who said it was on the short side. So the fact is, you can't really please everybody, and we will be experimenting on more content and less content, and you've taken some steps to make it a little easier for people to pick out the bits they want to pick out.
That's right. What we've done is added time codes to the description on the fullythreaded.com website. So you can look very quickly at the description of the show. And if you want to, you can jump right to the segments that interest you. I think people will find that helpful.
Yeah.
The podcast format is a lot different than regular terrestrial radio. It's something that you can access on demand. You can skip around. You can listen to part now, part later. And so as people become more comfortable with it, I think some of these issues in terms of the amount of content will really diminish. But we do appreciate the input, and we'll be paying close attention to it.
Yep. All right.
Another comment that I received a couple of times was that we missed a couple of the big issues or a couple of the big events that are happening surrounding the fastener industry. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate something that we said in the first episode, which is really we're the guys behind fastenersclearinghouse.com. The purpose of the show is to build on the community that's surrounding fastenersclearinghouse.com and to facilitate communication between all of us. We want to be topical. We hope we'll be a little bit entertaining, but we certainly don't want to compete with some of the news organizations that are already out there covering fasteners, such as American Fastener Journal, Distributors Link, FastenerNews.com, and so forth. This is really something that we're not trying to do. So we do appreciate that comment also, and hopefully the features that we do, the segments, you will find interesting and newsworthy, but in terms of canvassing the entire industry, that's really not something that we're shooting for.
Yeah, and neither do we want to attempt to try and be experts. I mean, there's a lot of people in this industry that we know who have been in it for a lot longer than we have, and a lot of them would claim that they're not even experts in this industry. However, we pay a lot of attention to them, and we'd prefer to provide a little bit of the background to some of these news items rather than try to provide the news items, I think.
Right. And you can always email us at ftr@fullythreaded.com. That's the email address. Speaking of events that are coming up, right down the road is NIFS East in Columbus, Ohio. That's happening on May 25th and 26th. I'll be there. I hope to speak with many people who are fully threaded listeners and maybe even pick up a couple of new segments. As we mentioned, it's been a strong several past weeks for Fasteners Clearinghouse in terms of the searching, and we'll move along now to our segment with industry analyst Holden Lewis. I think we'll hear a couple of things that might explain some of this fast activity, and why don't we get to that right now?
Right. I'd be really keen to know that myself to see if it follows up with our own gut feelings of what's happening.
Everyone in the industry, of course, is talking about the economy, what's going on, and to help us put a little bit of perspective on that subject, as much as there can be, we have with us Holden Lewis, who is an analyst for BB&T Capital Markets. He's an analyst concentrating on industrial equipment, machinery, and distribution, and he's joining us today from the Richmond, Virginia headquarters. Welcome, Holden.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Holden, you were quoted in a recent Barron's article on an improved climate for Fastenal this year, along with an increase in business from the companies they supply. What's behind that view?
Well, and the good news, Eric, is that it's not just specific to Fastenal. I think that a lot of industrial companies right now are experiencing generally improved macro conditions. Now, it should be said that not even Fastenal believes that that improvement is across the board. For instance, Fastenal has a significant exposure into the commercial construction side of the business, and frankly, what they're seeing there is not quite as robust as what they're seeing on the manufacturing and industrial side. So I don't want to give the impression that every market's doing great, but the fact is, when you look at the industrial side of the business, you are seeing a lot of very good numbers. We tend to track industrial production as being the most important measure. That tells us something about the markets that companies like Fastenal are facing. And the good news is that industrial production, since it bottomed back in the middle of 2009, is up about 10%. Now, that's still results in relatively flattish performance year over year, and you're just getting to those numbers now. But it's hard to dispute that where the manufacturing base in North America is concerned, you have seen the bottom of the cycle for the time being, and that business conditions of late have clearly improved. That's what the data is telling us. And if you track Fastenal at all, they do provide monthly sales releases, and I think that stripping out weather impacts and things of that sort, your listeners in the Northeast will certainly know what that's about. Stripping out those sorts of temporary impacts, you are beginning to see improvement in Fastenal's daily sales numbers over the past several months, reflecting exactly what you're talking about, and that is industrial production is getting better. And in terms of the source, to be honest with you, I think that it's at this point less about sort of underlying demand and more about companies no longer destocking the channel. That destocking trend was certainly enforced through the third quarter of last year, and I don't see a lot of restocking taking place. But what you're seeing is companies have now worked their inventories down to where they want them to be, and now production, which had been pulled down even below baseline demand, that production is starting to step back up so that you can keep the inventories flat. And that increase in production for companies that serve production lines or MRO end markets, that increase in production is really what's driving the improvement that you're seeing in the measures, and no doubt the improvement that a lot of your customers are seeing in their manufacturing base.
So you're saying that the upturn that we've been hearing reports about recently is not simply due to the replenishing of these severely depleted inventories, and this is an indication of improving economic momentum?
Well, you're right that we're just not hearing a lot of stories of increases in inventory in the channel. What we are hearing, and you will hear of spot increases. I mean, there are certainly some people that work their safety stock down to nothing, and you're seeing them add a few pieces here and there and put some inventory in the channel. But by and large, you are not hearing companies saying that they're so comfortable with the outlook that they want to begin to add speculative units into their inventories. What I am saying is that during the meat of the downturn in the first half of last year, you didn't just have demand coming off. You actually had companies reducing their inventories, which meant that their production rates had to be even worse than the drop in demand. And so anybody who was keeping fasteners on hand, well, if their demand was down 20%, but they wanted to get their fasteners down another 20% in terms of the inventories, you're talking about more like a 40% decline in production. That's what that's what the companies listening to this podcast felt. The good news is that production has to come up now that those inventories are at a flat level. What you'd hope going forward is that at some point companies do begin to want to restock that inventory, and that would allow the improvement that we've seen so far to sustain itself. But that's something that really is still very much on the come, and that we're still looking for.
I think you're going to find a lot of distributors that are excited to hear that information, because there's a lot of speculation about that subject from what I've been hearing. Let's turn to
like I said, it still has to happen. So don't get overly excited till we can actually see it.
Fair enough. I think everyone would agree with that. Let's turn the subject to jobs for a moment. The job market is an important indicator, of course, and we haven't heard much good news lately, including new headlines out this morning that suggest further job losses in the U.S. during March. Yet I've heard from numerous companies and sources that in the fastener industry, cuts seem to have stabilized and employees are actually being added. Does this match what you've been seeing, Holden?
You are hearing that people are starting to be brought on in small numbers. If I look at the companies that I cover and deal with, you can find a bit of a mixed picture there. There are certainly some companies that have added some folks that they laid off before, but a lot of those folks tend to have been furloughed, so they may not have been laid off with the intention of having them permanently be gone. But you definitely are seeing furloughs coming back. You're definitely seeing Saturday hours coming back. The 4 or 3 day work week, or even no work week, was relatively common 9 months ago. Now you're back up to at least 5 day work weeks. And so when you think about what you're seeing in terms of personnel out there, you really need to look at it in terms of the full-time employee equivalent, because in some cases you're not adding a lot of new heads, but just the number of hours coming back on stream to deal with the increase in the increase in production, I think that's what you're starting to see. So massive increases in heads. I don't think we're there yet. And a lot of companies that I speak to, they're really talking about no real need to invest in new people or need to invest in new equipment until revenues are probably 10 to 20% at least higher than where we are today. So I think the numbers that you're looking at, where headcount is relatively weak and employment is relatively weak, I think that's a reality. I even think that's a reality in the manufacturing space. But as long as the production's getting better and the demand is getting better, at a minimum, you're seeing more people working more hours and picking up more overtime. And I think that's generally making the sector feel somewhat better. So spotty hiring, for the most part, it's bringing people back and adding to their hours.
Well, that is bordering on positive news. Is there anything else that we should be looking at coming ahead? Any reports that are due out? This is the end of the quarter. Anything we should be watching for that should be a prime indicator for us, Holden?
Well, the main indicator that I want to see, and I guess there's two things that we look at in terms of the statistics that we track. The first is, and I alluded to this earlier, is inventory increases. Even though I said before that there really was no restocking taking place, there's still some good news in the data. And that good news is that the inventory that's out there relative to the shipment level has actually been improving now for several months. And although I don't think it's at a level that most people are comfortable adding inventory, if shipments continue to get better and demand continues to improve at some level, then you may not be all that far from the point where some customers or some companies are going to start saying, you know what, I'm getting more comfortable with the trajectory of demand, and I feel like I probably need to add a little bit more inventory here to get ahead of the curve. And so even though there's really been no inventory restocking process at this point, I think one of the possible surprises in upcoming months is that may begin to sort of settle itself out. You may begin to see some of that. And I think that's really important for us to keep a track on, because I think that's sort of the second leg of this. The other issue I think we need to watch really doesn't. I think 2010 looks pretty good. Again, this step up in production is going to carry most of the companies that might be listening to this podcast right on through the year. The question really is, how sustainable is it? And we look at a number of indices, one of which is called the Institute for Supply Management's PMI Index. A great leading indicator, comes out on the third business day of every month. There's a lesser-known indicator called the Precision Metal Forming Association's PMI Index that we track. And in that index, we have seen, there's more bullish sentiment than bearish sentiment. But both the bullish and the bearish side have sort of been going into the neutral camp in the last couple of months. And we really don't want to see the neutral camp expand at the to the burden of both the bulls and the bears, because that means that people are seeing basically flat conditions. And so perhaps it's characteristic of the earliest part of the cycle, but right now you have some signs that the inventory restocking phase might be just ahead of us, and some signs that maybe things are sort of stabilizing at an improved but not great level. And we really have to watch how those two things continue to play out. So we're going to be tracking those inventory to shipments data. We're going to be tracking the ISM, and we're going to be tracking the PMA data. And those are things that I would certainly encourage your listeners to be watching as well.
We will keep our eyes open, and of course we'll rely on you to keep your eyes open, probably more realistically. But I hope that we'll hear from you after some of these indicators make themselves known. And we have been talking with analyst Holden Lewis, who's speaking with us from Richmond, Virginia, from BB&T Capital Markets. And I very much appreciate you being on Fully Threaded Radio.
Thank you very much for having me.
Coming up next, attorney Mark Lehnardt talks anti-dumping. Stick around.
FastenersClearinghouse.com. Search and source from over 500,000 line items, or just a mouse click away and available at no charge. When the need arises, you won't find a better place to locate hard-to-find fastener inventory. It's where you need to be.
This is Joe Truckey of Cal Fasteners, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for us.
This is Robert Wanzer, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for American Imperial.
This is Andy Pell from ScrewCrew.com, and FCH works for the fastener industry.
Join the sourcing network now and show your inventory to a whole new market. Turn slow movers into cash. List up to 10,000 line items. Show them to distributors only or to the world. FastenersClearinghouse.com. It's where you need to be.
This is Randy Lemaster with TAPCO, and you're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
I'm glad you do, because most other people have said they have no idea what I think about.
No, I can tell from the look on your face. Ever since that last article came out in the winter edition of Link Magazine about the ASME standard updates, you've had your mind pretty much on one thing.
Right. That's right. And it's not always the ASME standards.
That's true. As a fastener geek that you may be at times, it is something that is important, and something that, I notice when we see all these searches coming in, and we've had such a surge lately, I can't help but realize that so many of these users appear to be using ASME standards, the B.18
point.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Are users actually punching these into Google and Yahoo? I mean, is this how they're searching for inventory?
Well, our experience is that the people in the fastener industry themselves, they don't really use these numbers. These come from manufacturing companies, okay? This is as far as we know. And the scenarios played out time and time again every single day, and that we've studied quite well, because the manufacturing companies talk to us about these numbers and about the searches when they get the results. I think it's probably important to clear up a little bit of a confusion just at the moment about an ANSI standard versus an ASME standard. And the truth is that, to the best of my knowledge, it's really one and the same thing. And the truth is that about 10 years ago, the governing body of these standards, the American National Standards Institute, really passed the responsibility for setting these standards down to different organizations. And the ANSI committee became a sort of a collection agency with the mandate to oversee the different standard-setting organizations. And for most of the fasteners that we use in ordinary industry, that became the body that was set up, that was mandated with the authority to set the standards, was the ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And so the standards are really, in this area for us, are really issued by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and they have the authority of the American National Standards Institute. So most people still refer to them as ANSI standards, however they really are ASME standards. And they govern things like the strengths of the materials that have to be used and the type of threads used in the various bolts and things. And they all have the format of generally the B18 point something or other standards. Now, as said before, what we know happens is that someone in a manufacturing company is tasked with filling out a bill of materials, and they go to the web, because that's really where they know how to find everything, and type in something like a 1/4-20 by 1.5 hex cap screw, and find out that they get 20 million answers or something like that. And so, faced with basically overflow of answers, they then go back and work out, how do we narrow this down? And so they're liable, they look back at their drawing and it says, must comply with ANSI B18.2.1, and so they type that in. then they get a much smaller set of answers. And usually one of those sets of answers has Fasteners Clearinghouse on pretty much close to the top of the list.
You're talking about when a user does a Google or a Yahoo search?
Yeah, and Google, or Yahoo or Bing or something like that. So they then get a set of answers which includes this Fasteners Clearinghouse. When they click on that search result, it goes straight to our search page. And so they get a set of answers for that type of bolt, which is our search page.
Well, how important is it in that case for FCH members who list inventory in our database? How important is it that they include those standard numbers with the inventory that they upload to us?
Well, it's very important, okay? Now, people in the fastener industry know that probably every single US Imperial bolt sold in America complies with, if it's a hex cap screw, it will comply with ANSI B18.2.1 standard, okay? However, not every bolt sold has that in its description, and the ones that do have it in the description are the ones that show up in the search results for FCH on Google, for people who search for those B18 numbers. So if you have that in your description, your nuts and or bolts or whatever people are searching for are going to be the ones that show among these priority results. So even though you know that this bolt complies, if you don't put it in the description, it won't be in the list that shows for people who search for these B18.2.1 hex cap screws.
But doesn't the scrubber software that we use to format input data, doesn't that assist and operate with some sort of a cross-reference to assist with this?
Well, if you're unsure for a start, on the homepage of Fasteners Clearinghouse, on the right-hand side, there's a set of links you can follow, and under the heading Popular Searches, and one of those links will be Fasteners by ANSI/ASME number, and that will take you to all the fasteners referenced by their ANSI standard number. But then again, those are only the ones that our members have happened to load up with those ANSI numbers in them. We do not, and we do not, and the scrubber does not put those numbers in to a fastener that it's sent to us. If it is sent to us, it can help in the identification process, because we know that if it's a bolt and it's a hex bolt and it's B18.2.1, then we know much more about it, okay?
Sure. So it really is a best practice to include that number where possible, that specification number, and that will help you to get better ratings and to make more of a success of participation with FCH.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and we have numerous case studies of our members who have taken a set of listings with us, reloaded them, including the ANSI and ASME numbers, and shown, significantly increased results, knowing that these are the very same items. And I often refer it to, the case of where you're walking down a store in a street, Magnificent Mile or something like that, and you walk past a store window, and some of these mannequins or something will have something on that attracts your eye to them. That's the same in terms of Google, of having an ANSI number against your fastener, okay? It just is one more thing that selects it and makes it stand out of the crowd of other fasteners. And making sure that these things get sold, hey, that's the whole point of FCH.
Something important for all fastener distributors to keep in mind. There is more information on the changes afoot with the ASME standards. You can reference the article that was written by Joe Greenslade in the winter issue of Link magazine. We're going to turn now to another story that was recently in the news, this time in Fastener Technology International magazine in the January issue. There was a story written by Mark Lehnardt, attorney Mark Lehnardt, and he was commenting and describing the situation surrounding the anti-dumping litigation that was rocking the fastener industry this past fall. So we'll get to that segment, and after that we'll speak with Joe Truckey of Cal Fasteners. With us now is Mark Lehnardt, and he is an attorney with the law firm of Lehnardt & Lehnardt. They are based in Kansas City, Missouri. Mark is the author of an article in Fastener Technology International in the December-January issue that was entitled, "Is It Over?" with regard to the anti-dumping and countervailing duty investigations, and he represented an importer in the proceedings. Mark, welcome to Fully Threaded.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Mark, in the recent article, the December-January article, you said that in the ITC's report explaining its 6-0 negative vote, that the report was still pending. Did that report eventually come out, and what did it conclude? Were there any surprises?
Well, it explained why it was 6-0, which is unusual. A negative vote sometimes is a 4-2 or a 5-1, but 6-0 is extremely unusual. And what it explained was that, the bottom line, the Chinese and Taiwanese companies were underselling U.S. producers, but despite the underselling, the U.S. industry was getting, as good or better prices than it had been earlier. So, there was no adverse price effect, there was no change in market share, and the U.S. industry was profitable despite the recession.
Speaking of profit, in your article you mentioned that the ITC and Commerce have two very different functions in the investigation. Do you know, did the Commerce Department ever complete any of its investigation, or was that something that was just struck because of the vote, the way it turned out?
Essentially, it was struck. I'm sure they began their part of the investigation, but the way that the process is designed allows the ITC to end an investigation and prevent the waste of resources early on. And so, as soon as the ITC votes negative, the entire investigation shuts down, and the Department of Commerce has saved a lot of its resources.
Of course, a lot of this came to a climax just before the NIFS show in November out in Las Vegas, and the buzz was all across the floor. There was a large forum that was planned to discuss the issue, and of course all of those plans changed. On the floor of the show, the buzz was abounding that there would be some sort of a reformulation of the petition. From your perspective, what's the possibility of a refiling of the petition under perhaps a narrower scope? And if that happens, do you have a feel for what would the chances be of a more successful petition, at least I guess in the from the perspective of Nucor?
Well, the refiling is still a possibility, but I think it's further down the road than I initially anticipated, because Nucor Fastener went the litigation route. That surprised me because this was a 6-0 negative, and to be successful in litigation, they have to overturn or get 3 commissioners to change their votes. There is, the circumstances for litigation are, friendly, or at least allow the possibility, because 2 commissioners have had their terms expire and will be replaced as soon as new commissioners are confirmed. And, when you've got 2 new commissioners looking at this, and you have the standard that is, it's a little scary for commissioners. They have to find a negative or to vote negative. They have to conclude that there is clear and convincing evidence that there is no injury or threat of injury, and no likelihood exists that contrary evidence will arise in the final investigation. And so, you get a couple of new commissioners, and they might be intimidated by that standard, and perhaps they can get one more to flip. I think it's unlikely that they'll be successful in the litigation, but the litigation is going to take a year or 2 or 3 or 4 to finally work its way out in the end. At the end of the litigation, if Nucor has not been successful, then there's a possibility that they would refile. And we've seen that in the past in with a couple of products where they come back 2 or 3 or 4 years later. And really what will decide that is what is the health of the industry in 2 or 3 or 4 years? What has happened? What happens over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years in terms of the U.S. industry's, the U.S. producers' profitability? What has happened to prices? What has happened to market share? So, what happens in the future? Will there be a refiling? It's too far to say now, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with the litigation and what happens with the economy.
Do you see a underlying lesson that should be learned by the fastener industry at this point from this whole experience?
Well, I think that for every industry, the issue is the same. People go to China because of the low cost, of goods, and it's provided a successful business model in many industries. But I think that the underlying principle that drives people to China should drive them other places as well, and that's diversifying supply sources. You can't, it's difficult when something adverse happens to your supply source if you don't have other supply sources. If you're dedicated to one area or one source, one adverse event can disrupt your whole business plan, right? So while China and Taiwan may be the most profitable sources, I think that looking to expand and diversify is the lesson that everyone should take away from it.
You have launched a website called importerhelp.com. The URL is www.importerhelp.com. And this website offers assistance to importers faced with anti-dumping issues. How does it work and how is it going?
Well, this is a website that I conceived when I worked for the Department of Commerce as a lawyer there in anti-dumping and countervailing duty proceedings. And what I saw was there are a number of importers that get caught by surprise with these proceedings. And, the import duties, because the U.S. has, a retrospective system, they call it. They impose duties for imports that came in a year ago or 2 years ago. The duties can jump 100 or 200 or 300%, and suddenly, your $200,000 profit on an order is lost to $1 million of anti-dumping duties, and it puts people out of business. What it's intended to do is provide information about anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties that are out there and that are coming, so that importers can be aware of what's happened in their industry, what's happened in other industries and specific products, and then plan for their future. It's not necessarily a way to get out of paying duties. It's just information to allow business judgment to be better.
We have been speaking with Mark Lehnardt, attorney with the firm Lehnardt & Lehnardt of Kansas City, Missouri, and also the operator of the website importerhelp.com. Very much appreciate it, Mark, and we look forward to seeing your articles forthcoming that will explain any issues as they develop.
Thank you, Eric. Pleasure speaking with you as well.
This is Fully Threaded.
The Midwest Fastener Association would like to congratulate all 11 recipients of this year's MWFA Scholarship Awards, which totaled $17,000. The MWFA is dedicated to education through our scholarship program, which has awarded over $300,000 since the program began, and through our ongoing education classes on fastener-related topics. This year, the MWFA marks its 64th year, making us the oldest association in the fastener industry, with members from coast to coast. We serve and promote the needs of the fastener industry and our members, and we invite you to participate. Please visit us at our website at www.mwfa.net. The Midwest Fastener Association, helping build the future of the fastener industry.
This is the traveling salesman at Fastener Talk, fastenerblog.net, and you're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
We are joined now by Joe Truckey of Cal Fasteners out in Anaheim, California. Joe, welcome to Fully Threaded.
Thank you, Eric.
You've got a reputation as a big gun on the golf course. Is that true? And if so, how's the game going these days?
Well, I used to be a big gun on the golf course, but I've had a kid, and he shows me what a big gun is. I used to be able to hit as far as him, but no way. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's younger, and I don't get around like I used to. But I still enjoy it.
Well, that's good. That's very important.
Yeah.
Have you played in any of the association tournaments? Is that something that you still enjoy?
Well, yeah, I just played in one back in October, and we won it. But there wasn't much competition. It was a beautiful golf course in Indian Wells, Celebrity Course.
Oh.
That's a beautiful golf course. We were just thinking about going out there again in a couple weeks when all the flowers are blooming.
Hopefully the competition is not tuned into Fully Threaded Radio at this moment.
I was thinking that. Having just dismissed them.
Well, Joe, if we could get into your operation, what sort of a distributorship is Cal Fasteners? Who are you selling to? And tell us a little bit about your business.
Well, when we started, it was back in 1975, we were a scrap dealer, or we pick up scrap and sell it. Somebody scrapped some bolts, and my dad's idea, it was a small little, my dad and I and my brother, he got the idea to start servicing people with fasteners, boxing them up, delivering them. Before, they used to all come in kegs. We started real small. I even got credit for it in high school, in ROP. But we started servicing the electrical industry because that's what my dad knew. Every day, we pick up new items and started hitting different industries. And, it grew, and eventually the Fastener Quality Act got us more into that, into quality, and we set up a lab out here with an inspection program. And that proved to be important for us because we started developing relationships with companies overseas, and we don't want any rejects when we ship it overseas because it gets too expensive.
Right.
But today, I think the overseas market's a lot bigger for us than it is than our own country.
I noticed from when we look through your stuff, you still have quite a lot of electrical stuff. Is this a carryover from your old propensity to deal in electrical stuff?
Oh, yeah. We sell electrical connectors for a company in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they still manufacture there. They've moved some to Kentucky and some to Canada. And it just gets tougher and tougher for them to compete here. So they're reaching out. Yeah, we've been a rep of theirs for probably 25, 30 years.
Oh, yeah, because I noticed that you probably a good 20% of your stuff is really electrical stuff, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've specialized in the electrical industry.
Okay.
There's some ceiling rings and meter blocks. There's meter blocks, which a lot of people don't know about in the fastener industry, but that's something that we found as far as shipping the parts to us to sell them to our customers. They would break apart, so we developed one that wouldn't break. Just used a different material and got it UL approved.
Wow, that's
and
pretty lengthy.
That's still going good. That's still, although, the construction out here isn't doing too well, electrical has a lot to do with construction.
What is the split of metric versus standard that you're doing these days?
Probably 10 to 15% metric.
That's all?
Yeah, a lot of our customers are overseas, and they make American parts overseas.
Right.
So we import them, and then export them, and then they import them here.
It's probably fair to say that customers overseas who are building things based on American specs really have trouble getting the US imperial size stuff. It can only come from here. I mean, that's stopped being made everywhere.
Exactly.
So do you see then that in terms of metric, 10% within the US seems fairly small, but I guess it's better than nothing. Do you see that is growing at all, or is that an unchanging percentage of business in the fastener business?
It's remained right there.
Is it? Okay.
I would, it was nothing before.
Yeah.
And I think it's 10, maybe 15%, but it's not much more than that for us anyway.
Okay.
So if you're doing so much foreign business, then I suppose your local market isn't really something that's impacting you as deeply as it is some other distributors who may be more focused locally.
No, we still do a lot of local, but right now the economy's in a dump. It's been trickling back, I think, since January. We weren't sure whether that was just, it's time to buy some more stuff. Their year supply or whatever, but it's been trickling back, and we're having a pretty good quarter.
In the March 29th edition of the Chicago Tribune, in the business section, there's an article called titled "Manufacturing Making a Comeback," and in that they show that in the month of January 2010, the manufacturing was at its highest level since 2006. They show that February it slipped back a bit, and they attribute this not only just to people replenishing inventories, but actually the fact that manufacturing has actually started manufacturing again for the first time, really, in something like 5 years.
Well, what did Mark Twain say? He said, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed, but if you do read the newspaper, you're misinformed.
Right, and this is possibly true. Now, to counter the misinformation part, they do show that the manufacturing dropped next to way, way, way low levels in something like December 2008, January 2009. Now, we didn't see that. What we saw, and we have a different view of all this, is that we saw a really distinct drop in demand and in searching on the web, probably starting in August last year, but we see a distinct pickup in months of January and February.
I've seen a pickup starting in January, and it's been pretty consistent. It's kind of leveling off right now. But as far as manufacturing back to 2006, I don't see that. If I compare this month with last year at this time, no way.
Right.
And then 2 years ago, no way. Not even close.
Yeah. Well, we see that this January and February look like there's about 20% less than January and February last year.
Ours is probably up a little bit from that year.
Okay.
So, but if you go 2 years ago and it's way below.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Depends on where you're at. We got hit hard, not just by the economic crisis, but we also got hit hard by being in California.
Right. Yeah. But you do have one of the benefits of California is that traditionally California benefits fairly much from aerospace, doesn't it? Aerospace contracts. And,
yes, it does. We're not really into the aerospace too much.
Aren't you? Okay.
Really indirectly we might be, but...
It brings up a good question, though, and that is, do you feel that an operation in California is subject to more pressure from government regulations of all varieties that translate into making it tougher for you to do business?
It's making it tougher and tougher. And we
Yep.
try not to think about that. We take care of our employees and get them everything we can. But it's harder and harder.
Right. I had the opportunity to sit in on a Midwest Fastener Association meeting in Milwaukee last week, and they did kind of an interesting thing. They had a panel discussion in which an importer, a distributor, and a manufacturer were commenting and sharing their experiences with current market conditions. And the interesting thing was that really there's 8-10 common things that are happening, such as it's harder to get paid, mistakes are costlier if you do make them, quotes are coming probably a lot faster, but in many cases they're taking longer to get out simply because the systems are jammed with them, and also they're not necessarily resulting in more business. But this led to a conversation about the pressures that companies are feeling from government regulations, the possibilities of the healthcare costs that are coming. And I think that what really the only thing we can conclude right now is that everybody is dedicated to doing the best they can towards their employees. So that's the common denominator, I think.
I don't know. I've always done the best that I can do for my employees. I mean, they got me to where I'm at today. I mean, they're a big part of it. You know, next to God, if I treat them fine, they're going to treat me fine, and that's exactly what we have going here. We have gone down from, we had 16 employees, and really have gone down to about, I think we have 11 now. And if you take away the 4-day work week that we're on, the work share program, that gets us down another 2 by reducing their hours. And that hasn't been too easy to do. I mean, they get to collect unemployment that 5th day if they don't have another job. And a lot of them, probably about 3 or 4 of them have had to get a side job besides working here.
Yeah.
But I can't just say it's all, you know, they've all suffered. I mean, my brother and I, my partner, have done the same ourselves, and we've cut our pay down 25%. It's just a tough time, and we just got to do whatever we can to survive.
Right. And we hope that what we've seen, we talked about, January represents a little bit of a sign that the economy will continue a little bit of a pickup, but we don't see that it's going to suddenly blossom out and get amazingly good. But the fact remains that it could hardly be worse than it was last year.
That could always be worse, but hopefully it isn't.
We don't want it to be. You're right. I've got another question for you, Joe. There's a lot of talk about the government stimulating the green energy businesses, and some of these, not necessarily in California, but they're in Northern California going up into Oregon. Do you see any business relating to these green power projects?
I'm starting to see some things. They're doing a lot of the solar industry, putting solar hills on top of your houses. And it's starting to pick up. And I've been looking into some special fasteners that I might be able to go after that business with.
Now, the regulations that govern those for solar stuff is probably American standards, whereas the wind turbine stuff is almost all it's German standard stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
So would you?
There's things that go along with those wind turbines. You know, in Palm Springs they're loaded with them, but there are American things in those also. Like anchor bolts. They got these big old huge foundation bolts that hold those things in the ground.
Well, I think the standards that govern them are the German DIN standards, even no matter where they're made. Now, I would expect that to change, and we would hope that would change to embrace some of the US standards. We just noticed from talking to some of our members in California, but particularly Northern California, that they had seen more business in things stemming from these green projects.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
What about the stimulus dollars that are supposedly floating around? Are there any shovel-ready projects that you're seeing that are helping to affect your business at this point?
No, I think they're staying away from California. No, it seems to be all talk right now.
Yeah. T. Boone Pickens, I guess, I just found this out several months ago, though. He basically pulled the plug on everything he was doing.
Well, the reason, as I understand it, is really that the main high-capacity distribution lines extend from the east coast and stop at the Indiana border. So the wind is mainly over in the Montana, Wyoming, those sort of states, and getting the power from there to back into the grid is the problem. So until they put another $100 billion or something into infrastructure, they can't really turn on too many of these wind farms over in the central states.
Well, that makes complete sense to me. However, I believe that it's likely that the existence of the grid is not as important as who gets access to the grid. And I'm not sure that all the connections were being made on a political level that would enable all the players who were involved in it to continue.
Yes, that's probably true. But they did say there were hundreds, if not thousands, of projects that were held up waiting approval because they simply couldn't be connected to the grid. Though the amount of money required to rebuild the grid either east or west would seem to be small relative to the amount of money that's gone into other stimulus projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's turn the conversation for a moment to a subject that appears right on the Cal Fasteners website. I was reading the news page, and it's got a couple of references, again, to the anti-dumping. I'm wondering, Joe, what's your take on the Nucor anti-dumping petition being refiled at any point? Do you have any thoughts on that? We've heard from several people on it, and what's your take on it?
Well, you go back a few years when they'd raise the taxes up on the imports, and then the American companies would raise their prices up and just always stay up above it. That's basically the problem here. They have to stay above it because of the bureaucracy that we have to deal with. If it goes up, maybe I'll make more money. I'll gross more money.
Yeah, there is that view.
You know, that's what's been going on the last few years. That prices have been going up, and it looks like they're going to keep going up for various reasons.
The conservative or conventional wisdom was suggesting that should the anti-dumping have been successful and the tariffs gone up, alternative countries, or at least intermediate countries, would have been identified and established, and things eventually would have normalized.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they would have just kept on buying from wherever they're getting it from, China.
I think so.
Yeah, the news that I got on there, I got that directly from Porteous Fasteners. And I think what they had to do is just hold on to it. They had to hold on to all their threaded rod and grade 5 bolts. They had to hold on to it because if they'd have sold it, they would have had to go back in time and pay everything from when this thing was filed, right. I suppose.
Yeah, right.
But when I received this letter, Porteous saying that it failed, I was kind of relieved because we've been telling our customers, hey, the price went up. The price went up. And they say, you can't raise the price. Everybody's got a price freeze. You tell the customers the prices are going up, they say, no, we'll go look around somewhere else. And that's really what's going on.
Yeah.
It's really tough to deal with. I mean, every time somebody calls you to get a price, you got to make sure you have stock on it. Before, in the old days, you just get it going because you know the price wasn't moving too much.
This is probably another indication of what we and other people see in the industry is that people are holding lower levels of stock if possible, but it means that they're running out and have to replenish their stock much more often.
Right.
And they're ordering smaller quantities, and so it's one of these other things that Eric alluded to earlier, which is that there's a lot of quotes, but people are really buying smaller amounts of stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Plus, their supplier base is growing because not everybody has them.
Yeah.
And it's whoever has them, that's where they go for it.
Yep.
And so they're taking up more time calling all the different companies. You're looking for onesies and twosies.
Well, yeah, right. They could always make it simple and just go to Fasteners Clearinghouse.
Exactly, or Cal Fasteners, who has the ability to. Right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
We've been hearing quite a bit of that same report all across the industry. So, again, it's one of these things that we're seeing a lot of. Well, let's talk briefly about some of the things that you're doing over at Cal to maintain your competitive edge, and maybe even you're making some changes at this point in the way that you're embracing technology to improve your business processes. I know this in conversations with you in the past, you've always seemed to be a fairly forward-thinking person on this subject, and I'm just curious if you have a kind of an overall philosophy on technology and fastener distribution.
Well, we try to stay on the cutting edge of technology. It's tough because it gets expensive to do that.
Yeah.
You got to be making money to be able to spend money.
Right.
And the software program we have is in SQL, which with you and them teaming up together has made the searching for oddball nuts and bolts and even standards a lot easier for our employees. That's one thing right there. I think that was a big plus for us. So that's one thing. Whatever's out there, if I could afford it, I do it.
As long as it's useful.
Yes.
Yeah, I always remember one of my early bosses reminding me when I was suggesting that they change computer system that you can always tell the adventurers because they're the ones lying down with arrows in their backs.
The downside of the technologist and technology.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it's an intrepid traveler who follows that path because a lot of times you don't have any guarantee that what you're doing is going to be the right thing for your business. You think that you are doing the right thing. You hope that you're doing the right thing, making a wise investment and moving in the right direction, but you can't necessarily be certain of it if you're leading edge.
Right. On the other hand, I have a brother, my partner, who's the opposite of me. And together we find that medium,
Yeah.
what makes sense and what doesn't.
Right.
Well, we've covered a little bit of ground, gotten to know you a little bit better, Joe, and I hope you'll come back.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Hey, mate.
Thanks for giving me a call and letting me share some of my stuff with you.
It's our pleasure.
Fully Threaded Radio. We'll be right back.
FastenersClearinghouse.com. Search and source from over 500,000 line items, or just a mouse click away and available at no charge. When the need arises, you won't find a better place to locate hard-to-find fastener inventory. It's where you need to be.
This is Joe Truckey of Cal Fasteners, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for us.
This is Robert Wanzer, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for American Imperial.
This is Andy Pell from ScrewCrew.com, and FCH works for the fastener industry.
Join the sourcing network now and show your inventory to a whole new market. Turn slow movers into cash. List up to 10,000 line items. Show them to distributors only or to the world. FastenersClearinghouse.com. It's where you need to be.
Matt Orrick with the Summel Products in Des Moines, Iowa, and you're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Brian and Eric, Fully Threaded. So I was thinking during the break, it was great to talk to Joe Truckey, but since he's even on our promo there for FCH, he's almost like a co-host of the show at this point.
Right, not quite a co-host, I don't think, but Joe's been a good member of FCH, and he does all the things that we like members to do. He loads the stuff up and keeps it pretty fresh, and that is what Google likes to see.
That's right. He's also a serious in-SQL user, and that's another subject that we need to cover on in Fully Threaded one of these days.
Correct.
I have a feeling, in addition to all that, that he's being very modest about his golfing skills, too, because I've heard from a few guys that some of these towering drives are something to behold.
Right. Now, not being a golfer, I can't really comment on that.
Well, email us at ftr@fullythreaded.com. Also, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fullythreaded. We've got a couple of videos up there, and we'll be adding another one over the weekend. It'll be part 2 of the Rob Lucas video that we talked about last episode, and we got a little bit of good feedback on that. Traction's growing on that one.
Yeah, right.
Thanks to all our guests, and this episode is going live on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day.
Yes, and just a note about April Fool's Day, if you really want to see that the web can be something other than a little boring occasionally, go to Google today and you'll see that Google is playing an April Fool's trick on itself. About a month ago, the mayor of a little town in Kansas called Topeka said he was going to rename the town Google so that everyone could find it. And as part of its April Fool's Day joke today, Google has announced as a joke that it's going to rename itself Topeka. And so for today, the Google logo has been replaced with Topeka.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll have to go out. Too bad most of our listeners won't be able to check that out because they'll be listening to it. But, maybe next year, that gives me an idea. What if everybody logged on next year on April Fool's Day and suddenly it's a nationwide directory?
Oh, well, that would be a joke.
Okay, Episode 2 is in the can.
Okay.
For Brian Musker, this is Eric Dudas. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.